The nature of the household in the early history of Genesis was threefold: patriarchal, patrilineal, and patrilocal. Each of these aspects impacted how the household functioned and the relative status of the members of the household. The household was patriarchal in that it was centered on the male head of house. There have been some arguments that the significant women in the Bible narrative were matriarchs, but they were clearly subservient to the patriarch, so they were not actually matriarchs. Additionally, they were patrilineal because the family is based on the male line and the oldest son was typically the heir. The other sons gave the father more status. The household is patrilocal because the wives moved to join the husband's household. This increased the dependency on the woman on the male head of household and affects how the offspring are treated. The composition of the household was different than a modern family. It could include extended family as well. In addition to parents, offspring, and extended family, the household would have included any debt servants and slaves, as well as any alien residents who had attached themselves to the family. The household comprised of everyone that the head of household was responsible for. Because the household was centered on the male head of house, the woman's role and status was lower, and she was subservient to him. For the Israelites, it was not a matter of biology so much as it was cultural. Part of the role of the head of house was to provide food and sustenance for the family, which gave him more status. Ancient Israel had a combination of farming and grazing economies, which is where so many of the agricultural metaphors come from. The metaphor of the man sowing the seed in fertile ground and the ground producing was used for the relationship between husband and wife. The husband put seed in the fertile soil, the wife, who then bore offspring. Because of their limited understanding of biology, they saw the man's part as crucial part, but didn't believe the woman provided anything necessary to produce offspring except for a place for the offspring to grow. The importance of the wife, and the only security she had, was in producing numerous offspring, preferably male offspring. Male offspring provided the head of household with an heir and increased status and honor. The female offspring were valuable for the work they could do. The need for an heir and other offspring served to help the household produce what was needed to survive is one of the factors that led to polygamy. And many times in the biblical narrative, polygamy happened because of the senior wife's inability to bear offspring. It was as if the wife who could not bear offspring was not complete. The pair of wives served to make a whole. It emphasizes the lower status and value the Israelite culture placed on women. This sets the stage for the competition and even abuse between the wives. The perception of the role adult women played in the Genesis narrative is an interesting contrast. In the book We Think, What We Eat, Structuralist Analysis of Israelite Food Rules and Other Mythological and Cultural Domains, Seth Daniel Kunin wrote that wives could be considered potentially dangerous, but the role of adult sister was safer for the household. Kunin cites several accounts in Genesis that show a pattern of where the wife caused harm or potential harm to the family. The first example was Eve in Genesis 3:1-6. It was Eve who was deceived and disobeyed God. Adam had a passive role in the Genesis account. The accounts of Sarah also continue this theme. The experience of Abraham, Sarah, and Pharaoh is a case in point. As Abraham's wife, Sarah was dangerous. He feared that he could lose his life because of her beauty, which Pharaoh had noticed. Abraham was only safe when Sarah pretended to be his sister, not his wife. This theme of the wife potentially being dangerous to the household is further developed by Sarah's treatment of Hagar. The animosity and open abuse of Hagar by Sarah is a prime example of the danger the wife posed to the household. Later in the Genesis narrative, we have the story of Rebekah and Isaac. Specifically, Kunin discusses Rebekah's role in Jacob's stealing of Esau's birthright. Rebekah had a direct hand in the scheme that resulted in Jacob receiving the blessing that Isaac intended to give to Esau. Rebekah's actions once again showed how the wife could be dangerous to the household. Rachel is another example of Kunin uses to portray the danger or potential danger of wives. While there was more than enough dysfunction within Jacob's household and her father's, Laban's household, Rachel's actions in stealing Laban's household gods placed Jacob's household in serious danger. Laban was furious, and only God's intercession through a dream prevented Laban from punishing Jacob and his household. Kunin points out that the danger wives posed was related to their being sexually attractive, as in the case of Sarah, and or their sexuality. He cited as an example of Dinah, who allowed her sexuality to put her in a place where she was raped. Dinah's brother attacked and massacred every male in the city. This once again placed Jacob's household in danger. The reason Kunin puts forward the idea that wives were divisive and dangerous while sisters were safer is that wives came from outside of the immediate family and they placed their interest ahead of the family's interest. Adult sisters, however, were insiders. They respected the family and the household interests because they were from the family. In other words, wives were outsiders, but sisters were family.